Hello everybody and welcome back to Typical City, the Champions League football, it's back. I'm excited for this one. Young boys, they definitely represent a challenge. I'm sure plenty of City fans are looking at this as potential whitewash, a fixture that we should be winning comfortably, very comfortably. But I do think young boys deserve a little bit of respect. They have dominated their league in recent years, winning 5 out of the last 6 Swiss Super Leagues. So really they are the Manchester City of Switzerland and we're off to Switzerland to face them. It's going to be hostile. I can't think of any better preparation for the Manchester derby because I think they're going to present counter-attacking football, similar to how I imagine United are going to play against City. They're also going to pose a goal-scoring threat because they're not shy of putting it back at the net because they won their league by 16 points last season, cantering their way to the title, easy. And they got 52 plus positive goal difference last season compared to Servette, who finished second with a +5 goal difference. So they know how to find the back of the net. They are goal scorers and they're good at it, very good at it. There is a reason why they take points off big teams occasionally, I'll give you that, in the Champions League, but still they are going to pose a threat. They drew 0-0 at the weekend to Zurich, so we do have a little bit of form on our side. They aren't in the greatest of form right now. They haven't won a game yet in the Champions League. RB Leipzig dealt with them quite comfortably in the end, and I think City are going to do the same in truth, because at the end of the day, as much of a threat they could pose, City are City right now, and I think the form that we gained at the weekend thanks to beating Brighton should stand us in good stead. I imagine a little bit of rotation is going to happen. I imagine Pep's going to look at the Manchester derby, look at the players that played at the weekend, look at the opposition as well, and factor in that even our benched players against Brighton are likely to come into a starting 11 against young boys and have enough in the tank and enough in terms of quality to dispatch them quite comfortably. I'd imagine that's going to be the case as well. I am predicting a fairly comfortable win. My predicted starting 11, I'm going to start with young boys from a predicted starting 11 and see what their manager Raphael Wiki has got up his sleeve. Mr. Raphael Wiki, Mr. Wiki Wild Wild West. What a fantastic name that is for a manager. Also, speaking of fantastic names, their stadium, Wankdorf Stadium. Just leave that in there, Wankdorf Stadium. Hopefully we come out on top. Oh, awful. Anyway, young boys. Racioppi is likely going to start in goal for them. He has done in recent games, so I imagine they're going to stick with that. They do tend to play a 4-4-2 diamond, and that tends to be their high-press football, counter-attacking football, win the ball back in the opposition half as quickly as possible, which sounds like a Pep Guardiola style formation, but it's risky. They tend to shift their diamond across the pitch whenever they see, wherever the ball is, effectively, to win the ball back in numbers and hound the opposition. They could do that against Manchester City, but it's incredibly high risk because we are the masters at coming out of those situations, breaking the lines, playing it out from the back and beating the press. Are they going to do that, or are they going to employ something similar to how they did against RB Leipzig, where they're more worried about the other end of the pitch? And I think if they're wise, if Raphael Wiki knows a thing or two, which I imagine he does, I would probably do that and think more about Erling Haaland and managing him as well as Manchester City's attack overall and play a flat back 5, which is what they did against RB Leipzig, with Janko starting as the right wing back, Amenda coming in. Normally they have Monteiro as part of the diamond in the middle 4. I think that Monteiro is probably going to get, left out instead of Amenda. Then Kamara in the middle, then Benito alongside him, and Garcia as the left back for young boys. In front of them, I think they're going to have a flat 3 of Lauper and Nies, if I can find the lad. There he is. And starting alongside Lauper is Ugrinic, which I think will be their middle 3. Up top is where the danger is posed. Cedric Itten alongside Alaya as well. Those two are lethal on the counter-attack, something we need to be mindful of and wary of in their speed and how they tend to split as a counter-attacking options and get into those channels, which we could be exposed, which I'll go on to shortly. Now, in terms of City's starting 11, I am going to start Ederson in goal, who has been rested due to the mental fatigue of anything, really, travelling such long distances during the international break, which is why he was rested against Brighton. I imagine Pep's going to throw him straight back into the starting 11 because it's the Champions League. I know it's only young boys, but still, not only young boys, because young boys pose a threat, and it's the Champions League. So Ederson needs to be thrown straight into the starting 11 for me. I still think he's not our #1 goalkeeper. Left back, I've gone for Nathan Ake, who again has not been getting that many minutes lately. I think he can be played in this type of game. Ruben Diaz, who didn't start the game against Brighton, I think that gave us a clue as to whether he would be starting or not in this game. I think he will. Now, Akanji is suspended, of course, for the Manchester derby, which means for me he goes straight into this game because that gives us the opportunity to rest other players in this game. Akanji may not have been starting. Pep probably had one idea to play him in the Manchester derby, potentially, but now that decision's been taken out of his hands. Akanji's likely to play. Right back, I do want to see Kyle Walker rested, because if you're dealing with Marcus Rashford in the Manchester derby, you want a fully fit, fresh Kyle Walker to deal with Marcus Rashford. That's my thinking in the long term going forward. So instead of Kyle Walker, I'd like to see Rico Lewis going alongside there, probably getting inverted at some point, but starting as a right back, inverting to play alongside the main man, of course, which I think will be Rodri. Again, you kind of want him to be rested for a Manchester derby, but still, Champions League, young boys need taking seriously. Rodri's is an assurance. He's that security, you know. How well do we play with him? He played almost every minute last season, didn't he? So I think, you know, it's risky, you know, eventually he's going to get a long-term injury if we're not careful, but, you know, keep him fit as long as we can, and I think he needs to play in a game like this. Ahead of them are the two midfielders that we haven't seen much of lately, in truth, is Nunez and Kovacic, which I think is a very controlling midfield. I think this midfield controls a lot of the play. There isn't that much creativity, I'll give you that, in terms of feeding the ball through the channels. I think Kovacic and Nunez can definitely do that, but they aren't going to be that explosive creativity like Alvarez or Foden, which we saw against Brighton. Bernardo Silva was working really well in circulating in that number 10 role between Foden and Alvarez. I thought the rotation of those three players that I've just named was really good. Nunez and Kovacic offer something different, not quite as explosive, but definitely more controlled. I think they're going to be dictating the midfield, and I'd like to see both of them play in that particular position. I think Jack Grealish will probably get a start along the left-hand side of the pitch. I think his cameo, 15-minute defensive cameo that he came on against Brighton defensively was brilliant. He put in about 3 or 4 tackles, put in really good numbers defensively in that short spell, which effectively made sure we won that game against Brighton. I thought he was brilliant, Jack Grealish, when he came on. Hopefully see more of the same again. Hopefully more in an attacking sense, though, this time. Get some goals and assists to Jack Grealish's name so you can start really posing a threat to Doku. Who do you start, Grealish or Doku? Because right now, in an attacking sense, it's Doku all day long, isn't it? All day long. But Jack Grealish, this is the opportunity to prove yourself. Get some goals, get a minute, an assist, as well as minutes. And then maybe you start posing a threat, and Pep's got a headache, a good headache of Doku or Grealish. I am going to pick Foden on the right, though, because I just feel like he's got that threat about him. I want him to get as many minutes as possible right now. The more minutes Phil Foden plays, the more momentum he gains. I do think he's that type of player. Again, it's a risk injury. You are thinking about those sort of things, but I think he's a momentum type of player. You take him out of the team, he finds it hard to come back in and find his feet again. He blows hot and cold at times, Foden does. Whereas if he's in the team guaranteed, I think you're going to get more hot than cold with Phil Foden. Up top, I have gone with Erling Haaland because, again, Alvarez's minutes, you know, he's been playing a lot in the two positions that Haaland and Alvarez play together. Alvarez has so much more of the ground to cover compared to Haaland. He is more of a fixed number 9, whereas Alvarez drifts, which means he's covering the ground more, which means he's more likely to be fatigued. And I think Haaland can be used in a game like this, as well as occupying their back 3, which is going to be a back 5, really. But really, they're going to try and double, potentially treble team Erling Haaland. Now, I imagine together, this is how I imagine the two teams are going to line up when they're actually in the moment of play. I think Kovacic and Nunez will eventually push forward. Their two centre-forwards will try to occupy a potential counter-attacking threat for young boys, but they're going to be pinned back quite a bit. I think Rico Lewis is probably going to tuck inside here. Akanji probably end up being part of the back 3 with the ball. I imagine that back 3 is going to be very spread out, which makes us susceptible to counter-attacks to these two players in particular, whose instincts, if we were to lose the ball in these positions here, which is these two here in particular, Nunez and Kovacic, you want to stretch these 3, Foden pulling out Ugranic, and Nunez and Grealish pulling out Niasse, and that leaves big gaps in midfield. Big gaps for Nunez to drift into, or Kovacic to drift into, or just to feed the ball straight into Haaland, and then Nunez and Kovacic have to get up alongside Erling Haaland to support him. I think that's the potential, but if we start pressing as high as I'm suggesting we are going to, and it's likely we are, the susceptibility is the counter-attacks here, because these two split. They both head for the corner flags effectively, or at least to the corner of the edge of the area, and then these 3 will back them up in speed as well, in counter-attack. So we need to be mindful of the counter-attack, and I think that's really their only opportunity for getting a goal against us, is speed on the counter-attack. I also think they're very susceptible to set pieces. They've been conceding goals from set pieces lately, young boys. They conceded a few in the Champions League already this season. So I think that's an area where we can expose them as well. If we're not breaking them down through our play, I think we just get a couple of set pieces, some corners like that. Send the big men up top, your Ruben Diaz, Rodri. I mean, even Nunes is not a short lad, is he? He's big. Haaland, of course. Nathan Ake can leap. Akanji's big. You know, we've got big players that can really offer a threat, in aerial threat, that we can do some damage to them. So hopefully we can. I think this should be a comfortable win. I'm going to go for 4-0 City. That's my prediction, Blues. 4-0 Manchester City. What's your prediction, though? Have you got one eye on the Manchester derby? I think we all have really got one eye on the Manchester derby. But what's your prediction for this game? What's your predicted starting 11 for Manchester City? Who would you play? Who would you rest? Get in the comments below. I really want to hear them. Please do drop a like on the video on your way out as well. It'd be hugely appreciated. Typical City is the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is Typical City now, holding up silver.